Today, we are diving into one of the greatest rivalries in the history of tech. Seriously. It's the epic 50-year story of AMD, a tale of survival, of making these unbelievably bold bets, and a relentless claw-your-way-to-the-top kind of fight.
You know, for half a century, if you thought about computer processors, you really only thought about one company. They set the standard, they owned the market, and honestly, they just seemed completely unbeatable. And that titan was, of course, Intel, the challenger, a company that spent decades living in its shadow, advanced micro devices, or as we all know them, AMD. This is the ultimate David versus Goliath story of Silicon Valley. Well, in 2022, something that seemed impossible for decades actually happened. AMD's market value shot past Intel's for the very first time. So the big question is, how on earth did the eternal underdog finally pull it off? But here's the thing. This story doesn't begin with two companies at war with each other. Believe it or not, it actually starts with them as partners, brought together by a deal that would literally change the course of personal computing forever. So let's start at the beginning. It all kicked off with a single contract for the original IBM PC, a deal that didn't just create a partnership, it basically planted the seeds for a 5-decade-long war. Okay, so here's how it went down. Back in the early 80s, IBM needed a backup supplier for its PC processors, so they pretty much forced Intel to license its tech to AMD. But that partnership went sour, fast. After years of nasty legal battles over shared technology, AMD finally won the right to produce its own chip in 1991. And that was the turning point. AMD was no longer just a backup plan. It was now a real competitor. That victory really set the stage for a period of just incredible highs and, well, devastating lows for AMD. This next chapter covers their first real taste of glory and the long, difficult decade that came right after. In 1999, AMD did the unthinkable. They launched the K7 Athlon processor, and this thing wasn't just a cheaper alternative to Intel. For the very first time, it was flat out faster. It was the first consumer processor to break the 1 GHz speed barrier, and it absolutely stunned the industry. For this one brief, shining moment, AMD wasn't just catching up. It was actually leading. The challenger had snatched the performance crown, proving to everyone it could compete at the absolute highest level. But, holding on to that lead is a whole different ballgame. Intel roared back, and AMD entered this really brutal period. For nearly a decade, they just struggled to compete, falling further and further behind on performance and efficiency, pushing the company right to the financial brink. To survive, they had to make a massive, incredibly risky bet. In 2009, they spun off their super expensive manufacturing plants. This move meant AMD stopped making chips and instead poured every single dollar it had into designing them. It was a total do-or-die play just to stay in the game. While they were struggling in the PC market, another strategic move became their lifeline. And it came from a pretty unexpected place: the world of video games. See, after buying the graphics card company ATI back in 2006, AMD had this unique advantage. They could build chips that combine both a CPU and a powerful GPU. They used this to win contracts to build the custom processors for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. A lot of people say this move literally saved the company. It gave them a steady stream of cash that kept the lights on during their absolute toughest years. So that gaming lifeline gave AMD the time and, more importantly, the money it needed to plan its grand return. This next part is all about the incredible comeback story, driven by a new leader and a completely new way of thinking about how to design a chip. In 2014, Dr. Lisa Su took over as CEO with a really clear vision. Stop making these small, incremental changes and go for a complete, ground-up redesign. The result was a brand new architecture they codenamed Zen. And the results were just staggering. The very first Zen architecture delivered a 52% increase in a key performance metric over their last generation. Let me say that again, a 52% leap in a single generation. That's almost unheard of in the chip industry. So what does that 52% really mean? Well, it's a boost in something called IPC, or instructions per clock. Think of it like a factory. Instead of just running the assembly line faster, you somehow made the line itself 52% more efficient. So now you're getting over half more work done in the exact same amount of time. It was a monumental feat of engineering. That Zen architecture became the foundation for their new brand, Ryzen. And it was a massive hit, offering incredible performance at really competitive prices. By 2019, Ryzen processors were actually outselling Intel in the consumer desktop market. The comeback was real. But AMD wasn't just aiming to win back the PC market. Nope. They were already setting their sights on the next great battle in computing, the age of artificial intelligence. You can see it in their strategy. AMD has been methodically acquiring key companies to build up its arsenal. First, ATI for graphics, then the massive $50 billion purchase of Xilinx for these powerful, flexible chips that are crucial for data centers, and more recently, snapping up AI software companies. They're basically building a complete toolkit for the future of computing. And that strategy? Oh, it's paying off big time. They recently announced this landmark deal with OpenAI, one of the biggest names in AI. The scale of this is just immense. We're talking 6 gigawatts of AI processors. It's a massive stamp of approval that cements AMD as a top-tier player in the AI hardware race. So you can see the battlefield has totally changed. The old war was fought over PC processors, Athlon versus Pentium, and it was all about raw speed. The new war is being fought in data centers and for AI dominance with server chips like Epyc and Xeon. And now, the key metric is performance per watt. It's all about ultimate efficiency. Which leaves us with this one final thought. For 50 years, AMD was the challenger, the scrappy underdog fighting from behind. But now, with a leadership position in key markets and a massive stake in the future of AI, we have to ask, is the underdog finally ready to become the undisputed leader?